Did you know a humble grain, one maybe often overlooked, holds a key to feeding communities in some of the absolute toughest climates?
It really does.
I mean, think about it. This pretty unassuming seed can actually thrive where many other crops just wither.
Mm.
So today we're diving into the remarkable drought resilience of millet, and specifically, we'll look at it within the context of shifting cultivation, that age-old practice.
Right, sometimes called swidden agriculture or GEMUS.
Exactly. And we want to uncover why this ancient wisdom might hold some really vital clues for our future food security.
Yeah, the sources we've gathered for this deep dive, they really explore millet's incredible survival skills,
Yeah.
and its deep connection to these traditional farming methods.
Okay, so our mission today is pretty clear. We want to give you a quick but comprehensive understanding of just how incredibly drought-tolerant millets are.
And how shifting cultivation, the way it's traditionally done, actually enhances this resilience.
And why all this knowledge is, well, absolutely critical as we face a more unpredictable climate globally.
Yeah, get ready for some surprising facts, maybe things that'll change how you think about food and farming.
Definitely.
It's truly fascinating when you start peeling back the layers of these, seemingly simple, time-honored practices,
Hmm.
and you discover these really elegant ecological and biological principles at play. Our sources, they paint a really clear picture. Millets aren't just sort of scraping by in harsh conditions. No, they're actively flourishing. And it's thanks to a whole suite of remarkably clever adaptations.
Okay, let's get straight into that then. This inherent drought tolerance of millets. It sounds like you're saying they're the sort of survivalists of the grain world.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, one of our sources, citing Ashoka and colleagues from just last year, really hammers this home.
Right.
Millets are emerging as these climate-resilient champions for future food security because they possess this almost superpower-like ability to handle drought, adapt to really tough environments.
Okay, so how? How do they do it? That's the fascinating part.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. And when we dig into the how, yeah, things get really interesting. So take photosynthesis, for instance.
Okay.
Most cultivated millets, your pearl, foxtail, proso varieties, they're C4 plants.
C4. And what does that mean in practical terms?
Well, what's the game changer about C4 photosynthesis, as researchers like Sage and Zhu highlighted a while back, is its efficiency with water. I mean, think about this. Millets can produce nearly twice the amount of food with the same amount of water compared to, say, typical C3 plants like rice and wheat.
Wait, twice as much with the same water.
Pretty much.
Wow. Okay, that's huge. That's a massive advantage, especially where water's scarce.
It is a massive advantage. And that's really just the start.
There's more.
Oh, yeah. Many millets, especially pearl millet, they boast incredibly expensive and deep root systems. This is something Ikrasat and Pasiora have pointed out.
So they can reach deeper for water.
Exactly. Imagine having these, like, straws that can reach way down into the soil, accessing moisture that other shallower-rooted crops just can't get to, especially when that topsoil dries out fast.
Right.
There was even a study in Field Crops Research that found foxtail millet roots can plunge down as deep as 1.5 meters.
1.5 meters. That's incredible. It's like having a personal well.
Kind of.
Yeah.
Tapping into those deeper reserves. And then there's this other clever trick called osmotic adjustment.
Osmotic adjustment. Okay, what's that?
Well, our sources, like Siraj and Sinclair, and some specific work by Babu and his team on finger millet, explain how these plants can build up certain compounds, things like proline and sugars, inside their cells.
And what does that do?
Think of it like an internal pump, sort of. It helps the plant cells stay firm, stay turgid, and functional, even when they're actually losing water.
Ah, so it keeps the plant inflated enough to keep working, even under stress.
You got it. Keeps things going. And research in Annals of Botany even showed finger millet can keep photosynthesizing even when water availability gets extremely low.
So even when they're feeling the drought, they can keep their engines running, so to speak.
Precisely. And to top it all off, pearl millet, for instance, has involved this specialized leaf anatomy.
Okay.
It helps minimize water loss through transpiration. It's kind of like having built-in water-saving devices. Research in plant physiology showed this.
Wow. Okay, let me recap. They're super efficient with water use because of C4. They have these incredibly deep roots.
Right.
They can maintain their internal water balance using osmotic adjustment.
Yeah.
And they even have ways to reduce water loss from their leaves. That's That's a pretty formidable arsenal against drought.
It really is.
But I think you mentioned earlier their life cycle, how quickly they mature. That plays a role, too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is where their phenological adaptations come in, basically, how they time their life cycle. It's often called drought escape.
Drought escape. Okay.
Many millet varieties, like barnyard millet, one source mentions it can mature in just 6 to 8 weeks. They have remarkably short growing seasons.
6 to 8 weeks. That's fast.
Super fast. And it allows them to basically produce a harvest before a really severe drought can even take hold, or before the seasonal rains completely stop. Bloom and Rao and Gahukar explain this concept well.
Right.
And get this, a crop science study even observed pearl millet land races in Mali actually speeding up their development when they sense water stress coming on.
They accelerate. It's like they're saying, okay, rains might not last, better hurry up.
Exactly. Like, no problem, we'll be ready in a flash. And then there's another strategy some use, like finger millet in Ethiopia. It's called drought avoidance.
Avoidance. How does that work?
Well, a study in agricultural water management showed they can essentially just hit pause on their growth when things get too dry.
They just stop growing.
Yeah, suspend development. And then when the rains return, they spring back to life and resume growing.
That is incredible. Like a natural pause and play button for survival.
Pretty much. It's this built-in resilience, letting them just wait out the dry spells.
Okay, so we've clearly established millets themselves are inherently tough customers when it comes to drought. Amazing adaptations. Now, let's switch gears slightly. How does the actual practice of shifting cultivation interact with this? How does it bolster or enhance this natural resilience?
Right, this is where the interplay between the plant and the farming system becomes really fascinating. Shifting cultivation, with its cycle of clearing, cultivating, and then those really crucial fallow periods.
Yeah, the resting phase for the land.
Exactly. That system inherently supports millet's ability to withstand drought in several ways.
Okay, so how does that cycle specifically help with, say, water management?
Well, those fallow periods, they're absolutely vital. They let the natural vegetation grow back, right? And that process enriches the soil with organic matter.
Okay.
Our sources mention this, and as anyone who gardens knows, soil rich in organic matter acts like a sponge. It dramatically improves its capacity to hold water.
Ah, so more stored moisture available for the next crop.
Precisely. More moisture stored that the millet crops can then tap into during dry spells. The land gets a chance to recover and, build up its water reserves.
Makes perfect sense. Now, what about the clearing part? Usually using fire, slash, and burn. Does that also contribute?
It does, actually. The ash that results from burning the vegetation provides this immediate influx of nutrients. Mike Curry and others highlighted this.
Right, nutrients for the new crop.
Yes, and that ash can also, in the short term, help improve the soil's physical structure a bit. Makes it better at retaining moisture, which gives those young millet seedlings a good start when they're most vulnerable.
Interesting. So it's not just clearing the way. The burn itself has these added benefits for moisture and nutrients.
That's correct.
Now, we often hear about intercropping in these systems, growing millets alongside other plants. How does that fit into drought resilience?
Yeah, that practice of mixed cropping, or polyculture, it's really a cornerstone of resilience in shifting cultivation.
Why is that?
Well, when millets are grown together with, say, legumes and other crops, as discussed by Brookfield and Paddock and Toledo, it optimizes the use of all the available resources.
How so?
Well, legumes, for instance, they fix nitrogen from the air into the soil, so they're naturally fertilizing the millets.
Okay, free fertilizer.
Basically. And then having a diverse canopy of plants can shade the soil, which reduces water loss from evaporation, keeps the soil cooler, moister, and crucially, it's a safety net. If one crop happens to struggle in a dry spell, others might still produce something. It reduces the risk of total crop failure for the farmers.
Right, so it's like a diversification strategy. Spreading the risk and they help each other out. A mini ecosystem designed for stability.
Exactly. And related to that, there's the minimal tillage often used.
Minimal tillage.
Instead of heavy plowing, seeds are often sown just by making small holes in the ground. Dibbling, it's called. This disturbs the soil much less.
And less disturbance means?
It helps preserve the existing soil structure and that precious moisture it holds. Less disruption means less water loss to the air.
That's intuitive. Less churning, less evaporation.
Okay. And I know traditional farmers often maintain a huge variety of seeds, right? Different types, even within the millet family. How does that seed diversity link to drought resilience.
Oh, this is absolutely critical. Shifting cultivators often maintain this rich collection of what we call millet landraces.
Land races.
Yeah, these are local varieties. They've been selected and grown over generations, specifically adapted to the local environment, including, very importantly, drought.
Well,
Researchers like Arunachellam, Tuwari, Brush, they've all highlighted how vital this agrobiodiversity is. It's an invaluable resource.
so they have specific varieties just for dry years.
Often, yes. A study in Current Science mentioned farmers in India's eastern Ghats specifically choosing and saving seeds from landraces that performed well in past droughts.
So it's like having a living library of options, each with unique traits honed over time. Precisely. A living library is a great way to put it. And we shouldn't forget the nutrient cycling aspect either.
For the burning.
Yeah, that initial burn releases nutrients that millets, which are generally very efficient nutrient users, can grab quickly. This helps them establish strong roots early on, which is vital for later drought resilience.
It really paints a picture of this deeply interconnected system, doesn't it?
It does.
The millet's own hardiness, the careful land management through shifting cultivation, the diversity of crops and seeds. It feels like a very holistic approach, really designed for resilience in tough places.
Absolutely.
Now, our sources also really emphasize the importance of traditional ecological knowledge, tech. How does this indigenous wisdom factor in?
Tech is, well, it's foundational. It really is. Sources, including a really compelling human ecology study from central India, they underscore the profound understanding indigenous communities have of their local environment.
Right.
And how this deep knowledge directly informs their strategies for managing drought, for selecting the right millet varieties.
Can you give some specific examples? What kind of knowledge are we talking about?
Sure. It covers a whole wealth of practical wisdom, things like knowing the optimal planting times based on really subtle local weather signs or indicators, the ability to recognize and specifically choose the most drought-tolerant varieties that have proven themselves over time. Even traditional ways of predicting drought based on environmental cues.
Wow.
Yeah, research in the International Journal of Agricultural Sustainability highlighted how farmers in northeastern India carefully consider even tiny variations in microclimate when deciding which millet variety to plant where in their fields.
So it's incredibly nuanced, very localized knowledge, refined over generations of just close observation and experience. It's definitely not haphazard farming.
Not at all. It's a deep, practical knowledge base, tested and refined through countless seasons, countless cycles of observation and adaptation.
Okay, so we've looked at the science, the traditional practices, the knowledge. Maybe let's see how this plays out on the ground. Can you share some examples from different regions where we see this resilience in action?
Yeah, definitely. Our sources give some excellent regional case studies. Take West Africa, for instance.
Right.
Pearl millet is just a cornerstone staple crop there in the rain-fed farming systems. One source highlights this. And a fascinating study in Niger, published in Experimental Agriculture, found that traditional millet varieties actually recovered better from mid-season droughts compared to some of the modern so-called improved varieties.
Interesting. The traditional ones did better.
In that specific study, yes. And another study in ecological applications showed this common practice farmers have of planting multiple different millet varieties together, each with slightly different drought resistance in the same field. It's a deliberate risk management strategy.
Right. That's a direct application of that seed diversity principle we were just talking about, hedging their bets.
Exactly.
What about India? Any examples there?
Yeah, compelling ones. In Karnataka, for example, there's a mention of farmers increasingly shifting to brown-top millet because it requires remarkably little irrigation.
Brown top millet. Okay.
And another study, this one in the Journal of Arid Environments, showed how finger millet, also in Karnataka, maintains surprisingly stable yields even when rainfall varied significantly year to year.
Wow. Stable yields despite fluctuating rain. That's resilience.
It really is. And there's also this mention of the Taal community's Millet Arc initiative in Taiwan.
A millet arc. What's that?
It sounds inspiring, doesn't it? They're actively preserving a wide range of millet varieties, specifically by continuing the practice of shifting cultivation. It really underlines how vital this traditional method is for maintaining that genetic diversity.
That's incredible. A living repository kept alive through the practice itself. And it's not just Africa and Asia, right?
No, indeed. The sources also point to Ethiopia and Sudan. Both finger millet and sorghum thrive there in areas with incredibly low rainfall, sometimes only 300 to 500 millimeters a year. These are truly tough crops in exceptionally tough environments.
It's really clear that this combination millet's own drought defenses and the practices of shifting cultivation has been a winning strategy in many diverse parts of the world for a long time. But our sources also suggest these systems are facing, increasing pressures today. What are some of the main challenges they're up against?
Yeah, that's a critical point. While these systems have shown amazing resilience historically, they're definitely not immune to modern pressures.
Yeah.
A big one is shorter fallow periods.
The rest periods are getting shorter. Why?
Well, things like rising population density, more pressure on land, Mertz and Palm and others have discussed this. It means the soil has much less time to naturally recover its fertility and, crucially for drought, its water-holding capacity.
So that weakens the system's ability to buffer against dry spells.
Exactly. It makes even drought-tolerant millets more vulnerable in the long run.
What other concerns are there?
We're also seeing, worryingly, a loss of that agrobiodiversity we talked about.
The land races are disappearing.
Yeah, and the erosion of traditional farming practices and knowledge. Jarvis and others point this out. When you lose that diversity and know-how, the whole system becomes less resilient. Plus, you have market and policy issues. Often, the big focus is on thirsty crops like rice and wheat, sometimes neglecting millets. There are mentions of this in Senegal and India in our sources.
That seems so counterintuitive, doesn't it? Not supporting the crops best suited to dry conditions.
It does seem that way sometimes.
Yeah.
And then you also have changing diets, maybe a stigma around millets, like they're poor people's food, as one source put it. That reduces demand in cultivation.
Right.
And of course, like any crop, millets face threats from diseases and pests. Finger millet blast was mentioned as an example.
Okay, so it's a mix of things. Environmental pressure, socioeconomic factors, policy neglect, even pests. All putting these traditionally resilient systems under strain.
It's a complex picture, yeah.
But it sounds like it's not all doom and gloom. There are efforts to revive millet and these systems.
Yes, thankfully. There's definitely a growing recognition of the immense potential here. Our sources highlight various encouraging revival efforts, new directions.
Like what?
Well, policy initiatives, for one. Things aimed at actively promoting millet cultivation. India's International Year of Millets is a big example mentioned in the sources.
Right, trying to raise the profile.
Exactly. And there's also lots of research going on developing even more drought-tolerant varieties, like Sona 3 or Neko mentioned in the sources. Plus, exciting genomic studies looking into the genetic treasure trove within millets, like foxtail millet.
So modern science is also stepping up to enhance this natural resilience.
Precisely. And critically, there's this increasing appreciation for integrating that invaluable traditional ecological knowledge, the tech, with modern science. That's seen as key.
Combining the best of both worlds.
Exactly. And overall, there's just this groundswell of interest in using millet's drought resistance as a core strategy for climate change adaptation, recognizing the huge genetic diversity for drought traits that already exist in those traditional varieties.
It really sounds like a renewed appreciation, maybe overdue, for what millet and these traditional systems offer in a world facing serious climate challenges.
Absolutely. It feels like we're realizing we need to learn from the wisdom of the past and thoughtfully combine it with our current scientific understanding. That's how we can build more resilient, more sustainable food systems for the future.
Okay, so bringing it all together from this deep dive, we've really uncovered that millet has this truly remarkable inherent drought resilience. It's baked into its biology, its physiology, its structure.
Whole suite of adaptations.
Right. And we've seen how traditional shifting cultivation practices often work with the millet, enhancing that resilience through careful soil management, intercropping, maintaining seed diversity.
Amplifying its natural strengths.
Exactly. And we cannot overstate the crucial role of that deep traditional ecological knowledge held by the farming communities themselves.
Absolutely fundamental.
So it's clear, millet cultivation in these systems, it's far more than just some historical practice. It really represents a potentially vital strategy for food security as our climate becomes more uncertain.
Yeah, and what's really thought-provoking, I think, is the broader implication here.
Go on.
Well, as we navigate this era of increasing climate uncertainty, could this ancient partnership, between millet and shifting cultivation hold some overlooked solutions, maybe crucial ones for forging more resilient, more sustainable food systems globally?
Mm.
Perhaps the future of food security isn't just about high-tech agriculture. Maybe it also lies in truly understanding and valuing the profound wisdom embedded in these traditional practices and the incredible potential of crops like millet.
That's a powerful thought. It leaves you wondering.
Right. What other seemingly outdated practices might actually hold crucial, untapped knowledge for our future well-being?